Hi, I'm Melissa, this is Matt. We're here to tell you about the past week of webinars that we've run here at LexisNexis. This week we had 5 webinars. The full list is in the description below the video, so feel free to jump ahead if you want to. We also have hyperlinks, so if while you're watching you think something looks really interesting, just click on the hyperlink and it will take you through to the full webinar. So we kicked off the week with Can Arbitration Learn from the Jackson Reforms? And Matt's going to tell you a little bit about it.
So the speakers for this week were for Philippa Charles and Edward Poulton. Philippa comes from Stewart's Law, is a partner there, and Edward is a partner at Baker & McKenzie. The topics they covered were can arbitration learn from the Jackson Reforms? For example, in promoting active case management and implementing a more stringent control on costs. And they also looked at the ways in which it's already ahead of English civil litigation.
After that, we ran a webinar on commercial leases. We were joined by Timothy Dutton QC and James Hannam, both of who are from Maitland Chambers.
The statute we're going to be talking about is the Landlord and Tenant Covenants Act, and we're doing that from the point of view of the anti-avoidance provisions in that Act.
The main effect of the Act was to replace the old law as it related to questions of privity of contract and privity of estate, principally pursuant to the provisions of the Law of Property Act.
They looked at recent issues with the Act and looked specifically at Section 25. So if you want to learn a bit more about that, this is a good webinar to watch. They also went on to discuss key issues that the Act raises for landlords and for tenants.
So the next webinar we looked at was privilege and disclosure, which is part of our restructuring insolvency series, and it's part of our ongoing relationship with R3. So speakers for this one were Matthew Weaver, who's a barrister at St Philip's Chambers, Francis Colson, who's a partner at Moon Beaver, and Mark Gleeson, who's a partner at Squire Patton Boggs. So they talked about issues such as privilege, Section 236 inquiries, and also the disclosure process in relation to insolvency following on from Jackson.
On Thursday, we were joined by Karen Hughes and Lee Squires, who both come from Hogan Levels, and they looked at key tax issues for commercial lawyers. Now, regardless of what you know about tax, this webinar really does have something for you.
So the webinar covered VAT and commercial agreements. It also looked at the latest in supply chain direct tax issues, including the new diverted profits tax and also transfer pricing issues.
Yeah, Karen and Lee did a really good job of reviewing the basics, but they also provided a more in-depth analysis. So we would really recommend this webinar for all commercial lawyers, regardless of how much you know about tax. If you want to get up to speed with issues that will impact you, watch this webinar.
So then we finished the week with another tax webinar, which is partial exemption. So Thomas Chacko from Pump Court Tax Chambers and Timothy Lyons from 39 Essex Chambers came in, and they talked about partial exemption.
So we hope very much that this afternoon we are going to be able to put VAT in a broad context, which we think is exactly where it should be.
The 2006 directive, which is the directive listed on the slide, sets out in Article 1 that VAT is only chargeable after deduction of the VAT already borne.
They covered the basic legal structure, looking in particular at the fair and reasonable requirement, and they looked at a lot of recent case law, so it's really good if you want to get up to speed.
They also looked at the public law implications and discussed Imperial College and HMRC, which is a recent case that came out in January.
Yeah, so good if you want to get up to speed with the latest case law on that.
Okay, so that wraps up this week. Thank you very much for joining us.
Don't forget to click through the links below the webinar to see the full videos. And if you're not subscribed already, you can go to www.lexiswebinars.co.uk, or you can just send us an email, webinars@lexisnexis.co.uk.
So we've got the webinars on the screen now, which are coming up for you next week, so feel free to watch those.
Thanks very much for joining us.